holding them accountable. Thank you.
Time's expired. Chair now recognizes Mr. LaTurner from Kansas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for being here today. The ONDCP has been on the front lines of our nation's battle against drug addiction and has had a far-reaching impact on public health and safety in our communities. I'd like to commend you, Dr. Gupta, as well as all the dedicated men and women at your agency for their hard work. Today, I want to talk about fentanyl. Over the past few years, Kansas has seen a staggering 73% spike in fentanyl overdoses, one of the highest increases in America. It's hard to find a community in my district that hasn't been impacted by this epidemic. 2 milligrams of fentanyl, a lethal dose for most people, is cheaper than a can of pop and is killing more young Americans than car crashes, suicides, and COVID-19 combined. Major drug trafficking routes along I-35 and I-70 corridors make my home state of Kansas ground zero for the fentanyl crisis. Over 1,200 Kansans have already died from fentanyl poisoning, and when I talk to local law enforcement, it's clear that this crisis is only getting worse by the day. In addition to securing the southern border, I believe proper education and awareness in our schools, homes, and communities can be the difference between life and death. We need to educate parents and teens on the reality we are facing, that a lethal dose of fentanyl in a Percocet pill or another illegal street drug is often just one wrong Snapchat message away. I have seen this tragic sequence of events play out far too many times in my district. The ONDCP must do its part and take serious action to help ensure communities across Kansas are educated on the dangers of one of the deadliest drugs our nation has ever seen. Dr. Gupta, the DEA has recently reported, and I quote, a sharp increase in the trafficking of fentanyl mixed with xylazine. Can you explain what xylazine does when mixed with fentanyl?
Thank you, Congressman, for that question. Xylazine, or mixed with fentanyl, or it's known as trank dope on the streets, basically enhances the duration, the high of the use of fentanyl, so people have to use fentanyl less often. It is an animal tranquilizer that was never and has never been approved for human consumption. So it is a terrible drug. It causes flesh wounds and leads to amputations like I, as my 25 years of career as physician, have never seen. And it has its own addictive capacity and capability, which makes the response, both overdose as well as treatment, much worse.
Are there any notable domestic sources of xylazine? Where's it coming from?
It's predominantly coming from Chinese manufacturers being shipped directly into U.S. or into Mexico and trafficked. There's some that is being diverted in other places as well, but at this point, it is mostly being mixed in on the streets or coming mixed in from the cartels.
Can you please briefly elaborate upon the high-intensity drug trafficking areas, what it does and what your role is in administering it?
So one of the 2 grant programs that Congress intended for and our office runs is called the HIDA program, or high-intensity drug trafficking program. They're located in all 50 states, especially where there are high drug trafficking areas, that work as a fusion center, more or less, for intel sharing and other programs that bring the local, state, federal law enforcement officials together and really process and work on cases. It is the best return on taxpayer dollars. For every dollar that's invested, $83 in return happens. And it was responsible for seizing domestically 26,000 pounds of fentanyl just last year.
You talked about the Fusion Center. I think Kansas has a model perhaps for the nation at doing that and doing it well. Thank you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes Mr.